Hello, welcome to NC Exclusive. I am Gbenga Abrowa. My guest today was President of the Republic of Botswana from 2008 to 2018 and a former commander of the Botswana Defense Force. He has been an outspoken critic of other African leaders, primarily Robert Mugabe, for holding on to power for too long. And has also given consistent support to the International Criminal Court. Unlike many of his peers, whilst in office, he focused on reducing poverty, expanding the powers of the presidency, and enlarged the role of the state in national media. My guest today, an NC Exclusive, is His Excellency Lieutenant General retired Dr. Seretse Khama. Your Excellency, a pleasure to have you join us at NC Exclusive. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pleased to be with you.
Now, Mr. President, you're on record as saying it was never part of your plans to join politics when you were in the army, but you were pursued to do so in the late 1990s. You became president of Botswana in 2008 and left office in 2018. What would you say is the legacy you believe you left?
Well, when I was in office, you could imagine, having come from the army, I had never, as you correctly said, politics was not on my radar. There are a number of reasons that I didn't want to follow in my father's footsteps, really because I just didn't think I was suited for the profession. It was not something that appealed to me. But when I was asked by my predecessor to come in, it was for one of those reasons, that there was this disunity, divisions, self-interest that was playing its part among some members of the party. And he thought that if I came in, I would be able to help resolve that. So I went in, and the one thing that guided me was advice that my parents had always given me, and what I used to watch them do was to be people-centered. And that's why I felt that the best way to be able to deliver on programs and policies that would improve the welfare of our citizens would be to go out and meet with people, have public meetings, do walkabouts, hear from them what their problems were, and then I would fashion our policies and programs to be able to accommodate their wishes. And that's what I did throughout my time. And I'd like to believe that I was able to achieve that to a large degree. But talking about one's legacy is always difficult, because I don't think it's something one should do. I prefer others judge me for what I did.
Okay. Now, Your Excellency, looking at Botswana's economy today, growth is slowing in an economy that has failed to diversify away from diamonds. More worrying, Botswana's supply of diamonds is expected to run out within the next 2 decades. How should the country be preparing for its future of its economy?
You know, different countries are blessed by certain natural resources. And in a country like ours, which has always had frequent droughts, and therefore there was always a challenge in being able to engage in meaningful agriculture, although we achieved quite a bit in that regard during my term of office. So things like our natural resources, especially fauna and flora, the wildlife, tourism, we managed to give it a significant boost during my term in office in order to diversify away from diamonds. And we went into exploration of a number of other minerals. And so we were able to find coal, we were able to find copper, smaller deposits of gold. There was nickel as well. But there was a time when, during the recession, we went through a difficult period where the commodity prices had dropped significantly. So it wasn't just a matter of diversifying from diamonds, but even on minerals in general. And so that's why we found that we were well endowed with wildlife, and that's why we were able to give tourism a boost. That's why we were able to give our agriculture production a boost. And that will be something that will always be a challenge to attract investors into our country, especially if you had, as we did, we still do obviously, neighbors like South Africa, which have a much bigger population. They have much more developed infrastructure. And obviously an investor would be more attracted to a country like that, which has a bigger population and the airports and the seaports and the railway infrastructure as compared to ourselves.
Now, Mr. President, I'm happy you talked about the subject of conservation of wildlife. Conservation of wildlife are things that are very dear to you. You are the patron of a few conservation trusts, and you also banned elephant hunting during your time in office. In 2019, the current president, Mokgweetsi Masisi, lifted that ban. What do you think this impact of this will be? And do you think African leaders take conservation as seriously as they should?
Well, actually, it wasn't just a ban on elephant hunting. It was a ban on all hunting of all species of animals. Because when we talked about tourism, I would say to the cabinet, you know, tourism in Botswana is really only wildlife-based. We don't have things like Victoria Falls or, you know, other kind of natural features like that. But we have the Okavango, and the Okavango is endowed with wildlife. We have the Chobe National Park endowed with wildlife. So if we deplete, as what was happening, our wildlife populations, we are also shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to trying to promote tourism. And when you see what tourism brings with it, you know, it's a major employer. It contributes a lot to the revenues for the economy. Plus, we are playing our role in securing nature, you know, which is something we need to do on this planet. And of course, when Masisi came in, he just lifted the ban. And you know, at that time, we had also been able to reintroduce rhino in the wild during my time in office. Now, since he came into office, we've had about 2/3 of the rhino population, which were in the wild, have been poached. Because the first thing he did was also to disarm the anti-poaching units. And you just say, but that's incredible. It was almost like he deliberately wanted these animals to be poached, and that's exactly what happened. So now we cannot offer as a country what we were able to. With the awards we used to win, tourism awards internationally, have also dried up and disappeared because we're not sort of recognized as that icon we had been able to achieve.
So he's gone ahead to upend all the gains that you made with conservation during your administration and those of your predecessors.
Yes, in fact, when we started this journey of wildlife conservation in my time, it was when another of my predecessors, when I was in the army, as you earlier alluded to, I went to him to say that, look, the conflict in the region has now ended with democratization of South Africa in 1994. That was the last of the countries that was engaged in a war of liberation. And it would be a good thing for the army to be used to assist the economy of the country, the other civil authorities, by protecting our animals. And that's when it started, about the mid-1990s. And from there, it just, you know, became the benefits you could just see over time increasing as we went along. But now that's all gradually being eroded quite fast.
Now, Your Excellency, some have called Botswana Africa's model democracy. I even wrote an op-ed about this about 8 years ago. Others say it's a role model for countries, for African countries to emulate. Botswana seems to have defied the cultural and ethnic determinism of those who believe Africa's problems are ethnic or tribal in nature. What lessons are there in Botswana's success story that the rest of Africa can learn from?
Well, unfortunately, Botswana is no longer a success story because what we had achieved, the model of democracy you talked about that we had obtained, has now been almost completely eroded by this man Masisi, who came in after me. In fact, I was the one who made him my vice president, and that was obviously a stupid mistake. But we are now suffering the consequences of that. But at the time, with our predecessors, and I would like to hope that I also contributed to what you described us as, it was something that we were very proud of. We were able to go around, hold our heads up high, abide by the rule of law, human rights, and be people-centered in everything we did. Of course, that has now all disappeared.
Now, Mr. President, you were president of Botswana for 10 years, and that time you belonged to a number of multilateral organizations, SADC, the African Union. But let's focus now on leadership on the African continent. The Mo Ibrahim Prize recognizes and celebrates African executive leaders who, under challenging circumstances, have developed their countries and strengthened democracy in Africa. For a few years, the selection committee couldn't even find any African leader worthy of the award. What do you think that tells us about African leaders and about democracy in Africa? Is there a dearth of quality leadership on the continent?
You know, when you talk about Africa, we have been for a long time plagued with issues like corruption, poverty, disease, conflicts, lack of development, inequality. Yet, Africa has some of the world's best natural resources and also best human resource. We have, in my opinion, the most vibrant people of any other peoples anywhere in the world. Our young people are very keen to learn and amongst the most capable and adaptable of any that I've known when I've gone around and visited other countries. We have got the best traditions, we've got the best culture, we are, you know, we excel in a number of different codes of sports. So why do we have this poor performance you refer to when it comes to democracy? But you hit the nail on the head. It's to do with leadership. It's because it's self-interest before the people. It's when they get into power, they want to enrich themselves. They want to continue in power. They change their constitutions from 2 terms to 3 terms in order to stay longer in power. They rig elections in order to stay in power. They lock up their opponents. So when you talk about democracy, it doesn't suit some of them because democracy means that if you're not performing well, there comes a time when you're going to be voted out. So if voting you out means, if having democracy means you're going to lose your job, then undermine democracy. And that's what has been happening in certain countries in the world. I mean, sorry, in Africa.
Sorry to interrupt you. We've seen quite a number of coups in the West Africa sub-region recently, and a lot of that, people would say, is because of failure of leadership on the part of a politician. You were outstanding in your criticism of bad leadership in Africa. You actually called out Robert Mugabe, your SADC neighbor, a few times. Do you think the African Union leaves it too late until military takeovers before they point out leaders that are sitting tight and bad leadership on the continent, or would it be regarded as interfering in the internal affairs of another sovereign nation?
The thing is that if the African Union and other regional bodies like ECOWAS, because most of the coups have been taken place in the West African region, if they want to assume the role that they have done of dealing with Africa's problems, of early warning, being able to intervene in time, giving themselves that role to do that, to be the referees on good governance, then they have to speak out. But this, unfortunately, that's not what's happening. Because these coups you referred to happen because of poor governance. poor leadership, driven by self-interest. Yet when the coup happens, you will find the regional bodies and the African Union immediately suspending that country from their organizations. They're very quick to do that. But that's because the leaders don't want to see the same thing happening to them.
It's almost like an old boys club.
But in the lead up to the coup, you will see you could see the groundwork is being prepared, that there could be a coup because people are rebelling against. Please don't misunderstand me.
Yes.
I'm not justifying coups in any shape or form. They have to be condemned. But if you want to avoid coups, then you need to step up and bring to the attention of those leaders who are putting in place the formula for coups to take place because of their poor governance.
Now, Mr. President, you've been vocal in your support of the International Criminal Court over the years. Botswana is a signatory to the Rome Statute that set up the ICC. Why do you support the International Criminal Court? And do you think those that criticize the court for unfairly targeting African leaders have any point?
There are two reasons.
Case in point, they look at what is happening in Israel. The United States and the United Kingdom did go to Iraq, and they went there for weapons of mass destruction. They didn't find any and left the country in shambles. So why hasn't anyone taken them to the International Criminal Court?
Well, of course, you're raising two issues there.
Yes.
When you talk about the International Criminal Court, we supported it in Botswana at the time. I don't know now, but at the time, because we wanted to see an end to crimes against humanity, perpetrated sometimes by leaders themselves. So you have to have a situation whereby when you talk about crimes against humanity, you need to prevent it happening. And if it does happen, people have to account for their actions. That's why we supported it. Prevention is better than cure. So if people know that they would be brought before an international court because they brought about crimes against humanity against their own people, that would hopefully deter them. That's why we fully supported that issue. Now, when you talk about the United States and Britain, even let's talk about Russia today. That is also a failing of the international order. Russia is one of the countries, it's not the only one. Russia has been and is now demonstrating that they are the biggest threat to peace and security in the world. They are a member of the Security Council. They have the veto. And the United Nations Security Council is a very undemocratic institution in that it only gives permanence to 5 members of the entire world community. And those 5 members have the power of veto. That certainly is not democratic. And I don't think giving any country, including a country in Africa, the same permanence as a permanent member or the same veto power will make it any better. They should just abolish the fact of having permanent members, giving them the what you call it. So if the ICC cannot deal with the situation you described, then you should have an organization like the United Nations Security Council, which should be able to do it. But for the structure, the weak structure that it has adopted, non-democratic structure, it has failed to do that. So whoever commits crimes against humanity, whether you talked about the United States or Britain, whoever else, there should be other things in place to be able to deal with them. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen.
Your Excellency, this is a fine place to go on a quick break. When we return from the break, we'll be looking at politics in Botswana, the next general elections in 2024. What are the chances of your new party? We'll be discussing this and more when we return from this break. You're watching NC Exclusive, and I have with me my special guest is the former president of the Republic of Botswana, Dr. Ian Khama. Welcome back to NC Exclusive and New Central Television. My special guest today is the former president of the Republic of Botswana, Dr. Ian Khama, and we've been discussing issues on the continent in Botswana. Now, Mr. President, observers of Botswana's politics claim you wanted to remain the power behind the throne after President Masisi was elected. That's why you anointed him as your successor. But the president is doing things his own way. You've accused the president of targeting your family. You've also called on the president to resign. What's your assessment of the state of affairs in Botswana since you left office?
I would just like to correct something. I don't think it's accurate to say that I wanted to be the power behind the throne. That's why I put him in. That's why I put him there. Anybody could have been put there by myself, because that was how our constitution works. That the vice president succeeds the president if you do not, once you've done your 10-year term, you leave, and then there's what we call automatic succession. So it could have been him or anyone else. So it's not that I somehow manipulated things so that he became vice president and then president. It could have been anybody. That's the first thing I wanted to correct.
Okay.
Sorry?
I'm listening, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So what happened when I left office? We just want to assure you, like I mentioned right at the beginning of this interview, about the fact that politics was not on my radar. So when I left office and handed over to him, I knew that would be the end. I didn't want to have anything more with politics. I was doing my charitable work. I was doing my conservation work. I was doing farming. But then I was invited, as you would expect as a former president, to go to officiate at the prize-giving ceremony at a school, or to go to an anniversary of a school. I'd be going around handing over houses to destitute people, engaging in general charitable work. And he objected to that. He objected to that because he said, no, you are now out of the picture. You're no longer the president. You shouldn't be getting, you shouldn't be having or enjoying that kind of profile anymore. And so he stopped air transport that would be taking me around the country. He stopped the government media, television, radio, the newspaper from covering me. He got the intelligence service to threaten businessmen who were donating to my charities to do that, so that there'd be no opportunity for me to be able to engage in any activity where I was seen in the public. So it was just some kind of power disease that he had, and that he felt that my legacy, that of my family, that of my father, should be wiped off and not appear anywhere. And that's what they did. Went to the extent of even trying to poison me after I left the ruling party. Fabricated charges against me, which recently the Chief Justice even said were fabricated. So this was the extent to which he wanted to go to try to remove my name as having been one of the leaders in Botswana. It was, and my favorite example is Donald Trump. We had our own Donald Trump, somebody who overturned decades of institutional democracy that had been there. All it takes is just one person. And you saw how in America, Donald Trump totally overturned on its head the situation that existed for so many years. Didn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican president, but you generally towed the line when it came to democracy. This man came along, as racist as he was, and turned everything upside down. It was all about himself, and that's why he couldn't even accept, up until today, that he had lost the election. We have somebody in exactly the same mold as he is. And like I said, it only takes one person, and we thought we were immune in Botswana, having had many years of having entrenched democracy, but we were extremely disappointed, and we are suffering the consequences.
Mr. President, did you have any inkling when the current president was your vice president that things might turn out this way? And would you say that it was an error of judgment on your part to have chosen him as a successor?
I had no inkling whatsoever. People, of course, now with hindsight, have come to me and said, no, we knew he was like this. And I said, well, why didn't you come and tell me? But they just thought, no, he was your vice president. We didn't want to rock the boat. Had I had any inkling that it would have turned like this, I would have fired him as my vice president. And if you say, do I have any regrets? Yes, I have great regrets. It was a big mistake. It was a foolish mistake. And I regret very much that I appointed him as my vice president, and then he went on to succeed me. Very regretful and unfortunate.
Mr. President, in your last submission, you said there have been serious allegations that have been fabricated by this administration, the current administration of President Mokgweetsi Masisi. The administration, one of those accusations, very serious accusations, is that you diverted $10 billion from Botswana's central bank to Citibank accounts in New York with the help of the South African Reserve Bank, and that you were in illegal possession of weapons of war, firearms. What's your response to all these allegations?
Well, it's very easy because it was 10 billion US dollars, which was money that the bank didn't even have. We never even had that much money at the time anyway. So like I've said to you, after that allegation came out, that in that affidavit, we engaged an organization in the UK to go and do a thorough audit of that affidavit. They came out with a 208-page report showing that the entire thing from beginning to end was a fabrication. The one person who was charged, who was said to be in cahoots with us, was acquitted by the High Court. And the official responsible for that affidavit there was an order given that they should be charged with perjury. Recently, like I said, the Chief Justice of Botswana wrote in a letter to the president that that case was fabricated. It's there in black and white, fabricated. So this thing was done in order to try to arrest me. They wanted me detained, and once in detention, I would be eliminated. Because they tried the poisoning, it hadn't succeeded. It was just luck that it didn't happen. So going to prison, they had arranged for someone to be given a sharp instrument and they would stab me with that sharp instrument. Because these kind of things can happen in a prison after all, can't they? And it wouldn't look like they had been involved. It would just be some prisoner. So when they tell the head of the prison service to do that, he refused. And 2 days later, he gets fired. 2 weeks later, he's dead. And they said it was COVID. So that's the kind of thing that is happening. And if it wasn't a fact, my brothers were detained, not charged with anything, just detained, with one of my brother's wives, also detained for no reason. People are being locked up left, right, and center. One of his opponents in his own party, a member of parliament, his former minister of finance, was also locked up recently. And the High Court ruled that his detention was unlawful and should be released. This is the Botswana that is in existence today. So all these things, as I say, have been vindicated by the Chief Justice himself, by the High Court of Botswana on those charges, by a 208-page report. This is just Masisi fabricating these things in order to get me behind bars where they can eliminate me.
Your Excellency, the Khama lineage, your family, has dominated Botswana's politics since pre-independence, going as far back as the 1870s, right through the modern presidencies of your father, Sir Seretse Khama, who created the Botswana Democratic Party, and then your administration. Why leave the party that you have served loyally for so many years in 2019?
You know, what a good question. I joined my father's party that he created with others, that he led. I went on to lead it for 10 years. But I am not just going to belong to a party for the sake of the name. I would join a party or be associated with a party which is going to work for the benefit of the people. in order and to continue to develop democracy in our country as we have been doing. As soon as they departed from that path and were driven by self-interest and the amount of corruption that we see Masisi and others like him are involved in, that is no longer my party. I'm not just going to hang on to it because my father started it and it was his party and that is one I led. Like I said, I don't follow a name in terms of the party. I follow what the party does for its people. And that's what I signed on for. And as soon as they gave that up, I said, fine, then we part ways.
Now,
and that was my crime. And that's why they came after me in the way that I've just described, me and my family and other people, not just us, other people associated with us.
Your Excellency, in an interview in August 2022 with a South African online news platform, you were quoted as saying the people of Botswana have already come to that conclusion that there will be a regime change in 2024. What are the chances of your party, the Botswana Patriotic Party, which was formed in 2019, in the next elections in 2024? And how much influence can you weigh from your current location in South Africa?
I am actually achieving more here currently in South Africa than when I was in Botswana. Because when I was in Botswana, everywhere I went, I was being followed around by his intelligence service. Following around, seeing which people I was interacting with, going after those people, intimidating them, harassing them. So from here, one thing COVID taught us was how to engage with the rest of the world virtually. So I'm able to address rallies, political rallies, from here in South Africa, in Botswana, virtually. I have better access to the media and to international personalities here in South Africa to tell them about what's going on than when I was in Botswana. So there's a lot that I've been able to achieve here. People come from Botswana because where we are is not far from the country. And I frequently have meetings with people from my party and others from other parties here in South Africa to strategize on the way forward. So being here has not turned out to be a disadvantage. In some cases, I would say I've been able to achieve a lot more than being here. As to our chances, we see ourselves as part of an alliance with other parties who are in opposition. And that is something which is work in progress. You know, it's not easy, but I think I'm confident is going to happen. When we look at the by-elections that have happened this year, the vast majority have been won by this alliance of opposition parties. And they have totally decimated the support that Masisi's party have. And there's no doubt in my mind that 2024, there will be regime change.
Now, Your Excellency, as we begin to conclude this interview, you've been in self-imposed exile since November 2021. Do you have any plans to return to Botswana while President Mokgweetsi Masisi is president?
Yes, I do. In fact, I put out a statement recently that I'd like to be back by Christmas. But there are a few things that I have to put in place. I have to get my affairs in order because I know when I get back, it's going to be business as usual. So one of the things that I want to do is to update my will to ensure that when the possibly inevitable happens, that is in place. And all other private affairs around me, that if I'm in detention or whatever excuse they try to fabricate and all the unlawful things they've been doing, that at least I know that my affairs have been put in place. So yes, I certainly would like to be there before the end of this year.
But Mr. President, don't you think it's a dangerous thing? You're heading straight to the lion's den, looking at the antecedents and what you've described and the antagonism the current administration has against your person.
I didn't hear the first part of your question. Didn't I think what, sorry?
I said, wouldn't that be a dangerous thing to do? You're heading straight to the lion's den, looking at the antecedents of the current administration and how it's come for you and your family members?
I have three groups of people here in South Africa, one in Botswana and elsewhere, who monitor what's going on in the country. I had never intended to be out of the country this long. And whenever I have that feeling or urge to go back, I consult them. And they're the ones who keep an eye on what's going on. And they have consistently said to me, don't go back because you'd be going, like you said, into the lion's den. But the thing that motivates me to want to go back beyond caring for just myself is to care for the nation, to care for the country. We have to make sure that in 2024, the next election, this man and his party are gone because they are so bad for Botswana. They really are. And I know that my presence in the country can have an impact. I hope I'm not sounding big-headed, but I know that their intention was because he sees me as the biggest threat to his re-election. And it is true. I am the biggest threat to his re-election. And I want to put that into place to make sure he is not re-elected. And I would rather do it at home, going around and addressing the people of Botswana, bringing it to their attention, not that they need it, because they're the ones suffering under his current administration. And I just want to be there in the lead up to the elections to achieve that. And whatever happens will happen. But at least I would have, I think, slept better knowing that I'd gone back home to try to do that than be outside the country.
Finally, Your Excellency, the longest reigning monarch in the British Empire passed recently, Queen Elizabeth II. How would you remember her, especially given the complexities of Africa's relationship with the British Empire?
You know, I've been asked that question when you talk about the British Empire. But the British Empire, like many other things which brought about misery and a dark period in our history, it's a thing of the past. I don't associate Her Majesty the late Queen with that. I would think about the time, the years that she presided over, a period when the countries which had been colonized became independent and were able to self-govern, and how she interacted with them, how her respective governments interacted with them, how the Commonwealth was strengthened over time in recognition that now we are equal partners, and it's not the master and servant relationship that existed in those days. And I think the best way to describe her is just to refer you to the outpouring of respect and adoration, the flowers, the tears, the people that you saw lining the streets when her coffin was in procession. And it wasn't just British people. People from all over the world were there. Some people even flew in just to be able to go and be at the lying-in state.
Do you have any fond, sorry to interrupt you, do you have any fond memories of your interaction with Her Majesty?
Yes, indeed, I did, because she did come on a state visit to Botswana when my father was president then. I met her on another occasion on the celebration of the VE Day, celebrating the end of the war, the Second World War in London. Met her at Buckingham Palace there. And then when I was president, I was invited to an official visit, which included a courtesy call on Her Majesty herself, and also at I think it was 2 Commonwealth heads of government meeting that I attended, that she was there as well. So I had that opportunity to meet her on about 4 or 5 occasions, and I was immensely impressed by how she was able to reach out, put you at ease, and how much she knew, her knowledge about everything. A really wonderful person, I must admit.
On that note, I would like to say a very big thank you to you, Your Excellency. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for taking time to talk to us at News Central Television. We do appreciate your time and contribution.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you. And that's it, an NC exclusive today. Our guest has been the former president of the Republic of Botswana, President Khama. Thank you very much for being a part of this show. We'll see you next time on NC Exclusive. I am Gbenga Abrowa.